Good morning. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. Today, we focus on the urgent need to have effective democratic political participation in Africa by spotlighting the Uganda's treatment of the concept of electoral reforms and governance and its resultant impact on the elections. I am now joined by a panel of distinguished guests who are in studio today to help us break down this topic. It is now my pleasure and privilege to introduce them to you, our dear viewers. Let me start with Professor Ndebesa, who is a professor of history and a renowned political commentator. Professor, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning, viewers and the listeners out there, and I'm glad that we are sharing these issues of national importance, and one item of it is electoral governance, which is very critical not only for democratic development but also for nation building.
Thank you, Professor, for joining us. Next to Professor is Mr. Ochieno Joseph, who is a UPC ideologue and a media personality. You're most welcome to the program, Mr. Ochieno.
The name is Ochieno.
Ochieno.
Ochieno of Nagongera of UPC, and I'm delighted to be here. No, it's nice being flanked by senior citizens who have stood the test of time of independence, objectivity, and academia, and taught many people, including some of the people who are possibly now politically lost. But I'm delighted that you don't lose all. I'm flanked on my right by an emergent group of more equally senior guys in academics, and so when we have this conversation about parliaments, politics, the Republic of Uganda, this region and this continent, so that yes, we're having a conversation with men and women in very safe pairs of hands. And I'm also delighted that from you up to all the camera people, they're fantastically young people. So yes, this continent has got a future. This country has got a future. We just want to make sure that we are not blackmailed by either our own or anybody else.
It's a pleasure to have you, Joseph. And of course, last but not least is Dr. Ojambo Robert, who is the head of department at the Faculty of Political Science and History at Kyambogo University. It's a pleasure to have you, Doctor.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here. Good morning, viewers and listeners. Just to correct something a little bit, it is the Department of History, Archaeology and Heritage at Kyambogo University.
They have separated it from political
science, yes. Oh. So we don't want to mislead our listeners. Yeah, we...
No, do you want political science to go down because it will be treasonable in some situations?
No. Just that is the right record. Okay. That is the right record. No any other reason.
Thank you, Doctor, for that clarification. Professor, let me begin with you. This is quite a sensitive topic, which has, of course, provoked the sustained and strong agitation from a variety of actors in the political space, the civil society, even in the academia. Since the 2001 presidential general elections in the country, there have been sustained calls for us to reform our electoral laws under the broader governance framework that pertains to those democratic processes. So, for the benefit of the viewer watching, what is it with the electoral reforms and which areas do we need to specifically focus on in the context of our multi-party political dispensation?
Thank you for your questions. But let me first state this, that electoral governance is very, very, very critical. One, for nation building, for conflict management, and for democracy. And electoral governance, you can share with the viewers that we look at it from, say, 5 aspects. the first aspect in the order of stages would be making sure that you have in place electoral laws through fair procedures, procedural justice, that is to say. If you have to have a fair and democratic election, so you have electoral laws in electoral governance. Number two, from there, you constitute administration of elections, electoral management, which would be the electoral commission and all these people below it and how it is managed, the management of elections. Then number three, you go to electoral policing, because it is critical, especially in the African context. Because sometimes elections, which in Uganda or some vernacular languages is called akaruru, which is like an alarm, it really becomes an alarm. So we have got that aspect of electoral governance, which is electoral policing, which we should focus at. Then from electoral policing, you go to monitoring, electoral observation and monitoring. It is also a critical area, because if you know that there are people who are overseeing you, somehow you may behave. And the fifth one would be electoral adjudication, because after elections you have to adjudicate in case there is a conflict. So if all those stages were managed very well, and if each one performed autonomously and independently and managed those institutions, I think would have a free, fair and legitimate elections. If I can repeat them hurriedly, we are talking about making electoral laws, you have electoral administration, you have electoral policing, you have electoral observation, and then you have got adjudication. So why do we need laws in advance? Yeah, we need to have laws so that the Electoral Commission and other agencies that are part and parcel of electoral governance can prepare for elections. Unfortunately, the electoral reforms have been instrumentalized for purposes of advantaging one group against the other. So you deliberately delay them, you stampede them. So at one time you say, no, we are not going to touch that electoral reform suggestion because we don't have time. But then, after every election cycle, especially in the past when we have had adjudication where the Supreme Court has come in, it has ordered certain things to be done by the executive before another election cycle. But the executive does not bring those reforms in time. It just waits deliberately to stampede the whole thing. So I think now, if we are thinking of using elections as a tool, as an instrument for good governance, as an instrument for nation building and state building, as an instrument for democratic building, then we should not politic. We should not do politicking. Politicking is not necessarily as politics. Politics is a given. Even those who are not aspiring for positions in power can also do politics. You and me and everybody. But politicking, taking advantage of your position in the executive to delay electoral reform tabling in the parliament so that you stampede the parliament, and also you say, we cannot touch that because we don't have time, is not good. For example, now, sticking points, I cannot mention here all the sticking points. After all, I think there was a citizens' compact at one time which actually pointed out some of those sticking issues that need to be resolved before we go for parliament. And two, I think the Supreme Court twice in the Kizza Besigye case, and I think Amama Mbabazi's case, came out clearly to point out some loopholes, some gaps, some lacunas within the electoral laws that need to be plugged in before we go for another elections, but the executive, which is supposed to table them, has dilly-dallied on them, and some members of parliament, I think at one time, came up with private members' motions and tabled them before parliament, but for some reason, they were manipulated out of the order paper and will remain in this zigzag deliberately in order to take advantage of the others, which is very, very unfortunate. To build this country, we need statesmen and stateswomen, not necessarily politicians. They say statesmen and stateswomen look at the next generation. Politicians look at the next elections. And this country, Uganda, since independence or slightly before independence, has failed, or we have not had statesmen emerging, people who would sacrifice their self-interest for the sake of the nation and have those laws clear. I have overheard, let me use that one, that, for example, the Minister for Constitutional Affairs, Honorable Mao, is proposing to cabinet, not to parliament, that important positions of government, of those government institutions which can mediate conflicts, should be publicly appointed or scrutinized like they do in Kenya. And among them is the chairman of the Electoral Commission and possibly all the commissioners. So that fairness and justice is not only seen, but seen to be done. But I don't think that will see the light of the day in Parliament. It is likely to be shut down in Cabinet. Because electoral laws are very critical if we have to have a fair. Sometimes we confuse fair and free. Free is mainly during that process of balloting. Fairness begins from the making of the laws, the appointment of the Electoral Commission and other polling officials. The policing must be seen to be fair. Adjudication must be seen to be fair. Observation must be seen to be fair. All those stages must all be fair, including the freeness at the balloting. And this will be guided by and informed by and located in the laws. But then the laws are stampeded at the last moment. We now have approximately 1 year to go for elections, isn't it? Because although elections may be in February, the process will start around May, June. And so we are left with less than a year. But we haven't tackled the electoral reforms. So when are we going to go for those electoral reforms so that the citizens can participate in them, can go to the Parliamentary Committee of Legal and Parliamentary Affairs? You know, it is deliberately done. And unfortunately, I am telling the nation, I'm informing the nation, you know, in 1980, I was in UPM. And we talked about such things like electoral reforms and the Electoral Commission and all that, how it should be neutral and fair. And some people just ignored the advice. So we used to say, we called ourselves the third force. We used to say that if for some reason you tell people in a block of flats that there is a sewage which is going to break, it's about to break, and let's have concerted efforts and repair it, and the rest refuse. When you are part of the owners of the or occupants of that flat or one of the flats in the block, what do? You don't just run away because you probably have no alternative. That is the only flat or that you can occupy. So you leave them. When this sewage breaks and everybody gets the smell or falls sick, then they will learn a lesson the bad way when you warned them before. So some of us commentators and analysts have warned that let's have straightforward laws. Let's not manipulate. Let's leave out manipulation and have procedural justice. And others have said that no, let's manipulate procedural justice and end up with procedural injustice, provided it will be to our advantage. Now, that is like the sewage, which is about to break and gush out that smell and the stuff. So, fellow citizens, fellow Ugandans, let us play a fair and free game. Let's have these electoral reforms introduced. For now, it is too late, but maybe next time, I don't know. But for those who are ignoring them, say, for us, we shall take advantage of them and defeat the others. When that sewage breaks, Uganda is still a nation in the making. It is still a project ongoing, and it needs to be handled sensitively. But if we let the sewage break out, the sewage has broken out in Khartoum. You know what is happening? Bashir has been in power for 30 years. And the Sudanese around Bashir were jubilating, saying, let's manipulate. Now the sewage has broken. All Sudanese are facing it. Somalia, when Siad Barre was there for 20 years more, and everybody was saying, our man, so Siad Barre, when the sewage broke, Somalia is no more. When Mobutu was in power, everybody was dancing around him, saying this and that and that. Now the sewage broke in Congo. Please, fellow Ugandans, fellow citizens, let's not wait for the sewage to come out. Because once it comes out, there will be cholera. And all of us will not be safe. Whether it is those who were enjoying the manipulation or those who were disadvantaged, all of us will have a challenge of the sewage. So can't we have electoral laws in time? And so the Electoral Commission plays by the game, police plays by the game, and also other politicians play by the game, and the judiciary, which should also actually be appointed, like those Supreme Court judges, should be appointed like in Kenya by the public. The Electoral Commission chairperson, the IGG, should be scrutinized by the public so that we have a fair game and we stop or stave off the sewage. Otherwise, the political sewage in Uganda can break out because Uganda is in the Great Lakes region. We have similar challenges. We have similar politics. We can have the sewage break. It may not be there now, but there are signs that the sewage can break.
Thank you, Professor, for your perspective. Mr. Ochieno, previously, the government has manifested a habitual tendency to introduce electoral reforms last minute. For example, in the run-up to the 2016 general elections, the government introduced their version of the electoral reforms in which only a single proposal, which was to have a new name for the Electoral Commission by adding the word independent. The Independent Electoral Commission successfully sailed through. But I want to ask the question, of course, assessing the current times, political times. Do you still have optimism that it is possible to introduce electoral reforms now and have them successfully pushed through before the next cycle of the general elections?
If there was goodwill, yes. But there's no goodwill, and I think my colleague Ndebesa is telling you that clearly he's using coded languages that for those who would possibly be pushing this is not in their interest. And in any case, whatever we are grappling with at the moment is their design and is serving their purposes. But unfortunately, I don't think they're considering the long-term interests of this country. And in any case, like Ndebesa is saying, I'm not even sure they're considering they're understanding the implications, some of their own long-term interests. If it's not them, but certainly their children. With a goodwill, the incumbent have got a huge majority. With goodwill, the incumbent knows how to use our tax dollars to buy people. With goodwill, they can sail through any legislation. With the goodwill, you can see what they did, that Parliament chose to go and sit in Gulu and Parliament chose to get an opposition legislator to seek to have a conversation and to seek leave to table a bill on a constitutional amendment on an area which possibly is important but possibly not as urgent, and it appears it's going to have its way. So it's a question of goodwill. But also something else Ndebesa said, that Ndebesa was in UPM in 1980, and Mr. Museveni of UPM at the time argued quite vehemently that he was quarreling with the political system as it was at the time. The composition of political parties and opposition political parties, that's why actually they came with the idea of very tempting argument, call it third force, meaning new way, things like that. And many relatively younger people, including the Ndebesas, would have joined primarily because they were young, impressionable, and whatever is being presented looks nice. And in any case, at the time, it was after 9 years of a cloudy dictatorship of Idi Amin, and in any case, some of them would not have been part of the previous pre-Amin government. So they really didn't know anything else except an Amin's government and whatever was now being presented. So many people got persuaded to that. But also at the same time, that 1980, Museveni strongly argued that if there was an attempt to rig elections, that they would go to the bush. I still suggest that elections were not rigged. The question of fairness that Ndebesa is talking about, it may have been the case that after 9 years of Idi Amin, whatever happened at the time, there were challenges, and elections will generally not be very perfect. I don't like the NRM guys will now then pick America as an example, but generally elections will not necessarily be completely free and fair. There will always be hitches. So in 1980, where we had 9 years of Idi Amin, systems broken, and an interim administration that was not willing to be part of the democratic process, Binaisa, Lule, Museveni, they were really all not from pluralist elections. So UPC and a smaller group of people, I think from DP, a section of DP, even a section of DP was not substantially persuaded. So the argument that we're not particularly prepared, and so therefore the process would not be free and fair, had traction, but it was purely political faction, attraction. Even then, the elections that took place in 1980, notwithstanding all the challenges, you couldn't compare it with the elections that took place in 2021. With all the challenges that it had at the time, you couldn't compare in terms of the manner in which the citizens were whipped and beaten. You couldn't compare it with 1980. In terms of everything else, including violence and, in fact, unfortunately, tragedy, death of our people, you couldn't compare it with the election of 2021. Now, you pick 2021 elections, take the elections before that, 2016, and the other day I was looking at, watching a video of Professor Kanyihamba reminding us that actually they, as sitting as the Supreme Court at the time, was the Supreme Court, Constitutional Court, that quite clearly came to the view that Museveni hadn't won an election, and he was talking about how, two critical members of that bench changed their positions and so changed the results. So meaning that's in the recent times. What happened then? So question is, if you look through that, are our challenges institutional, structural, goodwill, or is it the absence of the power of the fifth estate, meaning what I call the fifth estate these days, meaning basically the citizenry? That the citizenry make it so difficult for the executive, make it so difficult for the political class to basically use and abuse them. That said though, I think if you take to where we are as a country, where I was trying to talk about goodwill, if you look at the fact that right now, and Ndebesa has talked about the beginning of the election, which is hardly 12 months, but you can actually see that Museveni has been campaigning for the last 3 years. Even I suggest that even part of taking the assembly to Gulu may have been part of that, to go ahead and warm up to the northerners whom they managed to successfully confine to concentration camp, use and abuse and exploit for over several years. If you see his trip to Karamoja the other day in the late cultural thing, you've completely forgot about the Babati thing and now presenting yourself as the cultural friend of the Karamojong. So basically, election campaigning processes, starting with the season immediately post-election of a 5-year period, since we have a 5-year cycle. starting with after a new government has been sworn in and the position of the official position. Our job should be, if you're on the governing side, to begin working on your manifesto commitments in terms of the areas where you've been voted into and showing that you're delivering over the next 5-year period. The opposition holding you to account and showing why there should be the next government in the next election. So that's a process that goes through a really actively 4-year period. Number 2, then preparation, which could talk about electoral reforms. What is happening at that time? Is it the case that over a 4-year period, the executive is actually using your tax dollars to campaign and issue checks to priests, issue checks to funerals, issue patronage positions to people, basically buying electors? We don't really see that as part of the processes in terms of the spirit of electioneering. What happens to the opposition? The thing that happened to Kyagulanyi the other day, maybe you're not considering it now because elections are not taking place. But I would suggest those are part of the broader political reforms that we should be having. I'm actually arguing that the reforms we're talk about should be one political, should be constitutional, should be legal, should be cultural. That we need to create a situation in which actually it's criminal for a leader of opposition, the official opposition, to be treated in the manner in which Kyagulanyi is. I have always argued, including, I think on Focus on Parliament too, that if you brought Paul Semogero here, who was the leader of opposition between 1980 and 85, when DP was actively supporting NRM in the bush, when this country was effectively at war, in fact, the outskirts of Kampala was war, including Kampala was at war. There's no time in which you'd say that Paul Semogero was roughed up by soldiers, roughed up by police officers, roughed up by police security services, or at any time. Political climate alone. What am I saying? In any case, in any period from 1981-82, Paul Semogero's, the perception thing, Paul Semogero's ability as an opposition leader could easily have made him go to Tororo, persuaded the people who did not vote for him in Tororo, go to Soroti, persuade the people who did not vote for him in Soroti, come back to Luero and reinforce, his support, maybe in this place which was predominant Uganda at the time, that you are our voters, and of course you guys maintain there, and there is hope for you, and the next election we're going to do that. So that maybe by 1985, election time coming, you've consolidated, but based on the fact that the swing people were not sure, like Ochieno, because for me I was neither here, because remember I was just freshly a new electorate. That, well, last time I voted for UPC, but I think the Semogero has shown me in the last 3 years, there's actually not only is a tough guy, but actually could be doing quicker and faster than what UPC and Obote did. Electoral processes. That in itself, away from the constitution, is important. Do the Ugandan opposition today have the opportunity to have that kind of conversation? To the extent that beyond this panel, and Civic Space does a fantastic job trying to bring diverse opinion here. Some of our own main national medias, sometimes they think hosting Ochieno and hosting Ndebesa, they're doing us a favor. That's hosting this kind of panel, they're doing us a favor. I know it, and I know why I'm saying that. So it's extraordinary. So that come then towards going through elections. Election financing.
As you sum up.
Election financing. My view is that we should be, as part of the very early laws and regulations, try and create a climate in which it's possible for someone like young Isaac to be able to go and compete with Ochieno or a sitting member of parliament like Abdul Katuntu somewhere in Bugweri and actually win on the basis of the issues rather than how much money you have accumulated over a period of time. So do we put a ceiling or not? My view is that whether or not you discuss election financing from a ceiling perspective, but we should also be discussing from a perspective that when time comes for election campaigns, that people are not seen to be buying votes. One of, I would have been going to Parliament in 2011, but one of the reasons I did not go was because money was used as last minute and officially as last minute buying people, and I had evidence. I was supposed to have gone to court, but I did not get sufficient backing from my party. Quickly, I know that we're doing early summary. One of the other things is this. People go through election irregularities, people sue, somebody is found to basically have rigged elections. Should we allow people who have committed electoral offenses to go and participate in a by-election? One, should we allow them to participate in the next election? My view is that part of that as election crimes, away from finances and crimes, if it may or may not include finance, is that if somebody is found like that, one, they should be barred from standing at being candidates at the subsequent elections, whether by-elections or not, number one. But the two, that these things should be jailable offenses, that if somebody is found to be able to do that, people should go to jail. And in any case, anyway, my view is that actually people who have gone to jail, people who have committed criminal offenses with the criminal record should not be allowed to become members of parliament or to become presidents. I came from a background, I always keep on referring to the House of Parliament in the UK. You go from jail, you go to jail, you come back. No, you've lost it. One of the reasons that it helps, away from the discussion around election offenses, it helps you and your people in the back there, predominantly young people, including the many young people watching us, that before you go ahead and steal from Isaac, you'll have to think about implications, including the young ones who want to boast very quickly because they want to show off and get traded to short, quick money. Because I also now want to go to parliament, I want to go and replace Isaac, I want to go and replace Ndebesa. You better do it properly, because if you get caught and you spoil a little bit of your name, you're not only going to parliament, but you may end up in prison.
Thank you, Mr. Ochieno, for your insights. Doctor, I want to come to you. In the run-up to the 2016 general election, there was a very active, consolidated effort by a conglomerate of stakeholders, the academia, which represent the civil society, the political opposition then, and also to a certain extent, albeit limited, the government. This effort culminated into what we popularly know as the Citizens Compact, which had a raft of proposals that the populace was interested in having consolidated into our electoral governance and legal framework. Of course, much of that wasn't a success, but speaking of today, what areas do you think should be the focus for sections of the general public that are agitating for electoral reforms?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I've been listening to my senior colleagues here. But the first thing you need to start with before even we reach that pact and where it ended, you need to find out what is the purpose of election in an environment like Uganda. Under normal circumstances, we had decided that the only way to get our leaders, especially in managing public affairs, at the central, at the districts, and even at the local areas, would be through suffrage, adult suffrage. We used to have colleges up to a certain time until we discovered that colleges were not giving us good results. I think now we have left it to only a few of them. Like
in terms of the quality or the broader representation of the masses?
No, the colleges had issues. You remember the women representatives. In some cases, people just bought their way out. The workers' representative, for instance, up to date still use colleges. In fact, if you got a study and got maybe 1,000 workers, you just pick randomly and asked them who is their MP. They may not know. They may not know who is their MP because they elect through colleges, unions, and it is a very funny thing. The people there, even, I don't know whether they represent workers. Like, for example, Honorable Bakabulindi represents which workers? Because I don't remember when he last worked. He's representing which group of workers. And many others, I don't want to mention their names here. So colleges were not working. And then we resorted that at least LOC 5, LOC 3, LOC 1, and district leaders, LOC 5, and then president and MPs, we shall go for adult suffrage for all these things. And in the real essence, it looked like it can work. But over time, elections have been looked at as a way of maintaining power, a way of getting into parliament. It is like a transaction. So you don't get the people who are supposed to really be the leaders. And that is not only a problem in Uganda. It is an African problem. people still don't believe in these elections. And that's why you find that majority of our leaders, if you went from Uganda, you go to Rwanda, you go to Burkina Faso, you go to many countries in Africa, their initial entrance of government is not through election. Through coups, through civil wars, and they will find a way of justifying any of them. Like for us here, they justify that they were fighting against bad regimes and bringing peace, and they will justify. They will find some 10 points, 20 points, how many points, and justify. So at the end of the day, elections are not meant to produce or change leaders. For the case of Africa, if the incumbent is organizing an election, he wants to organize an election that he or she must win. And how does he win? By putting in place methods and mechanisms that protect him or her there. And that's why you see in Africa, it's very difficult to defeat an incumbent. I think it has happened only a few times in Zambia, once, then Ghana.
And in Zambia, do you remember how Mobutu mocked Kaunda?
Yes.
He says, what kind of president are you? How can you organize an election,
and you lose it? You lose it.
This is an African.
So in most cases, thank you.
Publicly?
Thank you. See, yes.
He was telling the public.
So in Africa, people don't organize elections so that they can give opportunity for people to compete and the best wins. In most cases, you saw what happened in Algeria. Can you call it an election? You saw what happened in our neighborhood here recently, whereby even before they announced the results, the competitors are congratulating the one who is going to win by 99%. So in places, these electoral laws and reforms that you are talking about would be for an ideal situation where you want to create like he said, a competitive ground that the best comes. I want to use Mao's analogy, although these days I don't agree with him. But elections in Africa are like a swimming competition where one person is putting on a swimming costume and is even putting on these fins for swimming. Then the opponents are dressed in gumboots, an overall, and a huge helmet. So when you dive in water, the other one, there is only one person allowed to swim. The rest will sink immediately. And that's what happens. In fact, it is very risky to contest for presidential elections in Africa. You go through, there is no one except in a few countries like Kenya, even Tanzania. After election, the runners-up has to run out of the country. You saw in the last election with the Magufuli, the guy almost was killed. He had to run out of the country. It's like a war. So at the end of the day, in fact, in Uganda here, the president refers to people who compete with him as my enemies. So in an election, how can you have enemies? So going back to your question, electoral reforms are not only legal. The debate seems to be pointing to that. They are legal matters that can be handled by the legal institutions, the parliament and the courts, because that's how legal matters are sorted, parliament and the courts. But you have also administrative reforms. These administrative reforms have been, as my senior there suggested, have been recommended by several judges and other people. They recommend on this, on that, administrative. You don't need even parliament to change the law. You just need to reform. Like, for example, they have said that police should not get involved into the election exercise. They should only provide security. But here, police stops candidates from doing certain things. It should be the chairperson, electoral commission, stopping, saying that I have heard, therefore you are not going. But the police says the chairman does not know, because I've seen several times when the chairman says that he did not order that. But the police has, so there is interference. Then there is structural reforms. The way we still carry out our elections, need reform, and there have been many recommendations. Then the legal, the one that many people talk about, because when that pact was formed, they said they were going to take it to parliament and discuss it, and then maybe where possible get a bill. But when it reached parliament, they said they have no money. The financial, because a bill to be presented in parliament, you must have a financial clearance from Minister of Finance, and that was not done, so it stopped there. Now, for Uganda, the few reforms I have seen, electoral reforms that have been taking place, they must have an advantage to the incumbent. If there is an advantage to the incumbent, some reforms will happen. You remember when the president reached a time and he could not contest because he had finished his terms according to the constitution. Reforms were proposed, and they added in a few things, okay? And that was swept very fast. And people were even saying, we don't want that one. That one, leave it. Change these other ones. But that one is the one which went through. He went on. When it reached that he was 75, and therefore he could not stand again, another reform was proposed to amend the constitution to allow people above 18 and any age to stand in perpetuity. And that was run very fast. The other reforms we have been getting is where they create districts. They create districts and constituencies. Those ones have been going through very fast, and they are at their...
They are now creating cities soon.
Yes, so very soon you will see an amendment to allow these people in these 5 cities that are going to emerge. You know, in Uganda now, cities grow like mushrooms. You just wake up in the morning and there is a city, even if it is a bush. So at the end of the day, you have to look at the lips of the president. If the president is saying something, you want to say that, yes, there is going to be something there. For example, the president now looks very fatigued. He may not manage this business of moving the whole country looking for votes. So the only reform I'm expecting right now, and I have been saying this, I will need time to be disproved, there is going to be an amendment soon or later, presented by anybody, but the suspect is Norbert Mao. They bring that amendment of electing the president through parliament, that we elect our members of parliament, then the end of the day the parliament goes and votes the president of their choice, and the one they vote will be our president. That amendment, I'm seeing it. And in that they are going to put some carrots. They will put some carrots. That's what he was proposing. They will put some carrots. You know, we need now to elect the chairperson of Electoral Commission. We need to elect the High Court judge or Chief Justice, whatever name they will call him. And a few carrots will be
maybe
put
a few
there.
surprises, the return of the term limit?
Yes, there will be a return of the term limit.
That's not a surprise. They have already supported
when it has
because
no
after
basis.
all, it is not affecting the president.
Yes.
So now term limits are going to be supported.
Yes, because they don't affect the president. So
why doesn't he support it?
So in my view,
Why doesn't he support it? Term limits.
who? No, he's going to support it. Because now
Because
it's okay.
10 years from
because
now,
when
it will affect him.
That's what I was remarking.
Mr. Ochieno, when we pass the constitution, it will mean 2, so you start afresh.
Yes.
You start afresh.
For
And by
40
that
years.
time, nature will not allow him
Doctors, you
to
sum
finish.
up before.
So may I think these reforms that you are talking about, civil society and others, civil society and the other groups have helped. But in most cases in Uganda here, and I have said this severally, the president, you need to look at the lips of the president. When the president says something, then it is going to happen. Because this constitution, from its time when they were making it in the early 90s and the later 1995 when it was passed, you look at the president's interests mainly took the day. So in most cases, we are not building these laws and reforms for the general public. In most cases, some people must benefit from them. And in most cases, the biggest beneficiary has been the president of the Republic of Uganda. So in my view, like now he's quarreling about this electoral rigging. He was in Bukedea last year after that election, by-election of LOC 5, and he said he cannot accept that people were rigging elections left and center. The only thing we saw, they arrested one DPC and a few people, and that thing ended like that. Recently, yesterday in fact, to be on spot, the president said that he suspects, in fact he did not say he suspects, he was sure. He has evidence that Noop stole his 1 million votes. He stole his 1 million votes. So I would be expecting that a president of his stature, he would come with a statement and say, I have now discovered that there is electoral rigging. Going forward, we are proposing ABCD. Of course, he proposed that they are going to introduce digital election. And he says that this time he will not accept. Sometimes they confuse. When it stops, they say that he go back to the when it stops, election is stopped there. But now, just as I finished my last point, mark you, the Electoral Commission has already released their roadmap.
Yeah.
They released that roadmap some time ago, and therefore we should be planning for elections. Did you see in that roadmap that they are going to digitize election? It was not there. 2, the Electoral Commission is also supposed to propose reforms. You remember going to last election, they at least proposed reforms, a few of them. This time they are mum. They have not proposed that we need ABCD to be reformed. Because I saw in the roadmap, I was looking at it carefully, I didn't see electoral reforms. But now I have heard in Parliament that some members of Parliament are coming up with the idea, to be specific, Mpuga, Matthias Mpuga Nsamba. He has said he's preparing a bill.
Mpuga, the former commissioner?
Yes, he's preparing a bill that is now what he wants to concentrate on. He wants to prepare a private member's bill to propose electoral reforms. I am wondering, when is he going to prepare that? Because very soon the Parliament is going to their last 2 years. They will be remaining with the 2 years. They have finished. They almost
less.
It's now less than 2 years. So when is he going to bring that bill? And when he brings the bill, will it get clearance from finance? I don't know. Because private members' bill must be cleared by finance. Now, I don't know whether that will be possible. Recently, just to borrow a statement on what Mr. Ochieno was saying, when the Parliament was going to Gulu, we thought that that decentralization of Parliament was going to discuss things that affect Gulu, and it would be restricted to that. We also saw how Lumu came, and that's how Ugandan things begin. Lumu comes up, he brings one of the major factors is to amend the Parliamentary Management Administrative Parliament Act. But in there he puts a number of things. And people are even suggesting that let's wait and look at this bill. Maybe he's the one who is going to bring the thing of electing the president in Parliament. Let's wait and see for his bill. Because they have even been challenging some of us who are commenting that have you seen? Because when Lumu or any other member is going to suggest an amendment, there is a specialized wing in Parliament there that drafts. Now, that is one thing. But the last one is that you can also take the bill in Parliament and it's amended. It's amended and they fix in a few things. So let's wait and see. The probable thing I am seeing is the mode of election is what may change for the position of presidency. But the rest of the things, police is going to continue beating people, election is going to continue being roughed up by all sorts of ruffians because of the structure, because of the legalese, some of them, and sometimes because of the poor administration.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your insights with us. Fingers crossed on the proposed Lumu bill regarding the aspects that speak to the concept of electoral reforms. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. We'll see you back in a moment.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. In this segment of Focus on Parliament, we continue the discussion on the need to have urgent electoral reforms in the run-up to the 2026 general elections in the country. Professor, let me come back to you by prompting us to revisit the explosive and damning and rather incredible remarks of the president yesterday, where he accused the political opposition, the National Unity Platform, of rigging the last presidential elections by over 1 million votes. This is a very incredible and extraordinary accusation, in a sense that the head of state, who for all practical purposes effectively managed that process, is now accusing the opposition of rigging him out. Should we read a situation where now the president himself is in charge of mooting perhaps proposals to have our electoral, legal and governance framework reformed so that we have free and fair elections in the country?
If I can tell you my position on that one, me, I have no problem with that. Every politician can say anything.
Do you believe it?
No, you don't have to believe it. But the politicians say anything. And he has said it, let it be counterbalanced, counterattacked, countered. I mean, for example, if we were to take him by his word seriously, if NOP cheated so big, imagine like 1 million, it means one of the weaknesses, or the major weakness, was the Electoral Commission, which declared false results. So first of all, the results should have been nullified.
That's interesting, yeah.
Are we together? Mm-hmm. But two, that means the Electoral Commission, then chaired by Mugenyi, should now be disbanded. It demonstrated publicly, officially, technically, that it is incompetent. If you can rig 1 million votes, but if NOP could do that, and NOP won mainly in Kampala area where the Electoral Commission is even seated. So that is a demonstration that, technically speaking, the Electoral Commission is incompetent. And the chairman then was incompetent. So one of the solutions to that would have to be to remove the chairman and replace him, because if the same chairman is there who could allow 1 million votes slip under him and he didn't even mention it, then that is another challenge. But the point is that politicians say anything to win votes one way or the other. You had Trump saying that these immigrants eat cats and dogs. Well, he has said it, but it may cost him some votes. Whereas here, I think Museveni can say that and the people don't mind. Scot-free. this is a banana republic. So I have no problem with that one. A politician can say anything like that. So he's trying to sway people against Kyagulanyi. By the way, in the electoral reforms, I think we should have a law making it criminal to use hate speech, and strongly so. So that if you call somebody a hooligan, that is criminal. It can be brought against you during the petition. If you call somebody mushroom, poisonous. If you call somebody a thief, when you have no basis for calling one a thief or a criminal or a killer, you should be brought to book. So we need to have a law in the an electoral law criminalizing hate speech. Why do I point it out? So that this country can be harmonized. We can build this country along harmony. You know, I will repeat this one. For me, personally, I look at free and fair elections principally because if it is free and fair, it will bring nation building. And we shall avoid conflicts and violence in this country. And on that note, let me point to you since independence how unfree and unfair elections have led to violence in this country. So, in 1962 and thereafter, the elections, the electoral system and electoral laws had slipped in this business of Buganda or Mengo having a college of the Ruchiko elect on behalf of the general population in Buganda, which was unfair because ultimately it rigged out popular candidates of DP who would have made it to the National Assembly. And those who did it in Mengo were laughing and they were feeling good. They felt good about it. Mengo did not survive 2 years later in 1966. You know, they were laughing in 62 when they were cheating DP. But when the sewage broke in 1966, it flushed them. But they were laughing in 62 that they had rigged DP. So in 1980, UPC was laughing. You know, candidates going to Arua. You know, there were candidates. Arua was insecure, and the candidates, the possible candidates in the West Nile region, actually, would stay in Kampala because Arua was insecure after the 79 war. And so they wanted to go and stand because there is a period, normally, when you are standing, there is a timeline. Then there was a roadblock in Karuma. And candidates, possible candidates going to Arua were arrested and delayed when they knew that the time you would not drive up to Arua to register. They released them by the time they reached there. Then they said the whole of West Nile was unopposed. Why? Because the West Nile was supporting Obote. When did the West Nile at that time support Obote? He is saying that there has been violence under NRM, which is true. But there was even violence. That's how Chiyonga ended up. Chiyonga was killed by the opponent of Chiyonga of DP, who was supposed to win in Bukonzo constituency. Died. Somebody in Mubenda, I think, was also killed. So there was violence at that time. This is not to say there is no violence now. This is for me to point out. Now the UPC was laughing. We have defeated DP. The whole of West Nile is unopposed. And they celebrated, and they drank, and they clapped. Where is UPC now? Now there are people who are celebrating because there is rigging of one kind or another. Rigging is not necessarily at the balloting. It is a process. We have said the first rigging now is delaying electoral laws. Another rigging now is creating constituencies in the midst of elections because you are going to excite people because they have got a new city or a new district. That is part of rigging. Refusing people to go on a public media like New Vision, or Radio Uganda or UTV, that is also part of rigging. Appointing biased returning officers, like I have mentioned to my colleague here during the break, how Mwanga dismissed, that is 1980, he dismissed all the district commissioners because district commissioners were supposed to be returning officers. So they saw through. So every district commissioner who was not seen to be a UPC activist was dismissed and replaced in the midst of elections. Today, somebody is going to challenge me that what evidence do you have? If you are a returning officer today, the one who is supervising you is the RDC and the DISO. And they are giving reports. If you are seen to be neutral, not even biased, one or the other, if you are seen to be neutral, they will report you and you will be removed. These are returning officers. A returning officer today is under the supervision of the DISO and the RDC. Now, you will see actually reshuffles of RDCs towards elections. And those who are seen to be neutral, forget about being biased, neutral, they are going to be reshuffled and removed. That means the returning officers left behind are going to be unfair. What am I talking about? Once the population, the voters, feel that the exercise is not free and fair, is not fair, and even if you win, you bottle up that feeling that it was unfair. Now, we are at a stage where we are building a nation. We want to have a national identity. How will somebody feel that he's part and parcel of Uganda with a national identity when he knows that the electoral system from the time of making laws, they have already been delayed? Now, the electoral reforms, that's a gone case, almost. There was an amendment to say that the chairman of the Electoral Commission, the commissioners and returning officers should be seen to be neutral in terms of being elected or appointed, where you can have public scrutiny. In fact, the proposal was that they should apply. There should be applications in the newspapers. And then there should be a neutral body to interview. And because the Electoral Commission work is basically technical, somebody with experience in logistical management should be a commissioner so that he handles logistical issues. Unlike the other time when there were no ballot papers in Kampala, ballot boxes and papers in Kampala up to 2 p.m. on the day of balloting. That means they lacked, if it is true that it was not deliberately delayed, that means they missed a logistician technical there. So that we see that these people are neutral. But now when you appoint somebody whom people already suspect he's biased, like people, I'm not saying he's biased, I have no maybe criteria, but there was suspicion that the current chairman, because you know Besigye is a potential candidate, but we have a chairman who prosecuted Besigye when he was a prosecutor. And where the judge judged in such a manner to say that the prosecutor was prosecuting things that were false. Now you appoint that one as a neutral arbiter, where Besigye is likely to stand. What did you expect? What did you expect that Besigye and the Mugenyi relations to be? So we need to look at administration of elections, the policing of elections, adjudication of elections by the judges. The judges should also be really neutral. Can the current, is it a bench? The orders of government, yes. Can it be neutral? I am suspicious it can't be neutral. Naturally, humanly speaking, they cannot be neutral. Ask me why, for example, I have no vendetta or issue with the current Chief Justice. At all. I don't have. But the current Chief Justice was an activist, was a mobilizer, was working in the NRM Secretariat. So, humanly speaking, how do you expect him to be neutral? It is human. You and me, it is human. Everybody in that position is likely to be biased. So can we please think as statesmen and stateswomen. Look at the next generation, not the next elections. Because whereas we jubilate today, when the sewage breaks, it broke to Memo because they jubilated that they defeated Chiwanuka. That Chiwanuka was unpopular in Uganda. Chiwanuka was unpopular in Uganda. How come that his successor, Sembogere, was popular later? You know, that all candidates of West Nile were not liked in West Nile. They were arrested in Karuma. And they couldn't go to West Nile. And UPC said, you see, we have got the whole of West Nile unopposed. And they jubilated. These fellows, they were dancing that. Now, where are they dancing?
Thank you, Professor, for your submission. Let me bring in...
Fellow Ugandans, let's be serious. We might jubilate today, but when the sewage breaks, we shall all sink in that sewage.
Let me bring in Mr. Ochieno. I am sure he's provoked
to
respond to that charge, but before he considers a reaction to that, there is a whole argument that even as we think of how to propose electoral reforms to improve our governance structure and systems, that we even need to reimagine altogether the democratic governance setup of the state, in a sense that we need to have a new variation in the system of governance, walk away from the universal suffrage as we are practicing today, and maybe introduce what you had in the 80s, the parliamentary system of democracy, or any other of those variations. So I want you to respond to that. And I know you're itching to respond.
No, what we had in the 80s and what we had in the 60s were universal adult suffrage. And the credit must be given to UPC.
In Uganda, it was universal?
Yes. It was universal adult suffrage. And in fact, only the 1961 elections was indirect elections as a result of, in fact, the push by Mengo. You're absolutely right.
Can I correct you?
But in any case...
Can I correct you?
Yeah.
Can you allow?
Go on.
I want to tell you for sure, historically, that the 1962 elections
in Buganda
were indirect. It is Mengo sitting as Ruchiko that elected 21 members to the National Assembly. It was not universal adult suffrage. You can continue.
I was talking about Ugandan elections, notwithstanding the Buganda question, as you say.
Buganda is not in Uganda.
No, but that's not, I think that the fact that I say universal adult suffrage, with the exception of Uganda, in 1962. But in 1980, it was universal adult suffrage.
But at the parliamentary
I think system, there they agree. They agree. The 1961 and 62.
61 was quite clearly in Uganda. It was indeed, as Professor says.
Actually, 61 it was universal adult suffrage. Only that Mengo created a system of violence, and that's how Chiwanuka won in universal adult suffrage in 1961. So it is 62 which was a college.
All right. So the Electoral College in 1962 in Buganda.
Yes.
Nationally, it was universal adult suffrage. In 1980, it was universal adult suffrage across the country, including in Uganda. I'll come to Arua because you realize I have to deal with Arua. It's actually not true what Ndebesa is talking about in Arua. It was not a detention in Arua. In Karuma. The candidate who won is Dr. Moses Apilga, and I think I've told this program. And it becomes a very tiresome thing for us, going around these things, particularly, maybe that's actually part of the challenge facing us. Because part of our problem is a question of
national... we reflect,
yes,
so as to better the current times.
And part of our problem is that we don't like national consensus. And when it comes to national consensus that some of us have been pushing for a long time, when it comes to a convenience of facts, we lock ourselves in and sometimes we cease to think. That's why we get the likes of Museveni. They come and then they buy off our heads, and then they do the brutal thing they did in Luwero, and then they carry our country for 40 years, the mess in which they did. Because in many cases, we would like to deal with history as convenience. What happened in the specific constituency that I know of in West Nile was that the DP candidate chose, and I don't know whether they've been in the program, chose to travel by road on the day of elections. Now, with the bad roads between Kampala and Isaac, I don't know whether you've been to Arua, West Nile is quite far, you know, and with the potholes of a means time, it could have been even much farther, you know. Now, the UPC candidate, Dr. Moses Apiliga, you know, meets the DP candidate the day before, tells him that he will actually buy him a ticket. Dr. Apiliga was a fairly privileged medical doctor, was already a Kaunda's doctor all this time. So they had the money, but this other guy also was okay. Said, let's fly to Arua. The DP guy said he was going to travel by road. You see what I'm saying? He said he was going to travel by road. Obote had met the UPC parliamentary group, I think 2 days or 3 days earlier to that. And they structured that all of them should make sure that they're in their districts and their constituencies leading to election number one. And also instructed them, if you're discussing elections, that on the day of elections, make sure you don't sleep in your houses. I'm just making a bit of a story, but it's an important story because people get kidnapped, considering the state in which we are. Dr. Piliga flew to Arua. The DP candidate chose to travel by road on his own volition, and I think these guys, we need to look for them. I don't know, I think the guy is still alive. I think he was alive until 3 years ago. We need to get him on this program because I need to sit with him, because we need to settle this nonsense, particularly the Arua thing, because that one we have absolute evidence. This guy decides to travel by road. Now, clearly there were roadblocks, not against DP, but roadblocks across the country, number one. Number two, remember that the Musevenis and their bunch had threatened they didn't want elections in Uganda, and they said it so, and it's very open. They didn't believe in close politics. Museveni had actually said that Uganda was not secure and settled enough for us to have the 1980 general election. Interestingly, Dr. Piliga is an interested party because pre the return of Obote, Mwanga, Museveni, plus I think 3 others, had made trips to get support from Tanzania, Zambia, Mozambique, and I think one other country. In all their meetings as a National Liberation Front, Museveni was the only one campaigning to all those leaders saying that Uganda was not yet ready for elections within the 18 months that had been stipulated. So it's not surprising that these guys were prepared for that. But number two, West Nile is an Amin area, you know, which was still quite resisting the UNLF and going to resist and anything to do with the pending elections. Also quite clearly, maybe roadblocks that end may be much more tighter than anywhere else. Now remember, this was within 18 months of the Liberation War. When this man Museveni's court arrested me in 1987, it was over 18 months after Museveni had come to power. And yet between Kampala and Entebbe, there are 7 roadblocks in 1987. So give context that there would have been many roadblocks. There used to be almost a permanent roadblock near Makerere here, anyway. There would possibly be one near Kawempe, there would possibly be one around Luweero, Semuto, all this kind of place.
Let me just interject.
No, the point, no.
Does it change the fact that he was prevented from being nominated by the
because
elements of the UPC?
He's not one.
You're being taken.
Almost all the constituencies.
I think that's the most...
Mr. Moderator.
No, you're being...
Mr. Moderator, can I say something?
You're being taken...
Can I say something?
No.
Can I say something? I think we are losing the focus of debate to things. I myself, I did my dissertation on the constitutional challenges to democracy in Uganda. So all the things I am talking about, you are talking about here, are documented in my dissertation. The fact is, 1980 elections, there was some element of blocking opponents. The facts are there. I don't want to compare and say this one, therefore this election was okay and this one is bad. But our elections have not been good since independence. Since the time when we were doing the Legico, you find that there was a complaint of racial segregation in the Legico. There was a problem of women. Then later the DP and UPC struggle. So it was not only that Arua issue. Even in Ilango, the uncle of Obote, Kena Adoko, no, Adoko Nekyon, the cousin to Obote.
Then you're really not, with respect, you're really not helping this particular.
He was a DP person, and he also got problems.
I'm dealing
and
with...
it's a fact. Okay. So in 1980. There is a fact that Mwanga interfered a lot with the elections. That one is a historical fact. But what we want to say is that how can we move away from that type of thing? Let's not
Exactly.
compare. How can we move
No,
away from
the
that type of
comparison
thing?
is to demonstrate that since
And
independence,
get into
no free
better
elections.
Let him
elections.
make his point and
Yeah.
finish it.
Because
Yeah.
these things are
Drive your
factual.
point home.
Yes. I am trying to dismiss the nonsense that this specific DP candidate was detained, because he wasn't, and that's a matter of fact. The guy wasn't detained. The guy there were a number of roadblocks. So roadblocks delay. So the fact that he was a parliamentary candidate does not make him a special person to move. By the time he reached Arua, nominations had been closed. So for the record, the guy was not detained. The guy went by road. His opponent...
But you also agree that he was not the only one. There were others.
There were others.
I am here...
Why are you talking about only one?
I am dismissing this very specific nonsense that the DP candidate for Arua was blocked. He was not. You know, he went to Arua by road, arrived too late. In any case, I've also argued here that about these elections, until today, DP and UPM people have failed after 45 years, 40 years, 46 years, 41 years, have failed to show which parliamentary seats DP won, including those ones where the candidates would have been stopped, which would have changed the results of this course of this thing. And the reason is this. We are discussing this election thing because DP and many people in NRA, picked on the 1980 general elections without foundation, went to butcher our people in Luero, break our system. Now, after 40 years, we are struggling. We don't know which way to get out of this mess.
Thank you, Mr. Ochieno. Doctor, the question of how do we structurally improve our electoral and governance systems, I posed the question of, do we need to perhaps reimagine a new system of governance altogether? I want to ask you the same question.
I think we need to build on what we already have. We have seen where there are faults and where we have problems. In my view, I don't have a problem of the people electing their leader, because they do it in even where the population is bigger than that of Uganda. In the United States of America, they do it, and many of these areas, India, where there is they elect their prime minister, and many other places. So the issue has not been the method of election. I don't think that has been the issue. And I had a very big problem with the Justice Vyavakama when he was drumming up people to go and participate in elections. I asked him, has the issue been the number of people to vote? The issue has been on the results. Ever since in 1961 to date, the conflict over election has been on the results. In 1961, in 1960, 1980, there have always been a complaint of results. For example, in 1962, people are not happy that some members were just being appointed in Luchiko and going to the parliament when others have been elected. And unfortunately, when they reached there, instead of sorting out that problem, they sought another alliance, and people accepted it. YK and UPC allied and sidelined the other ones, and they remained there to complain. So the issue...
And the alliance broke up in 2 years later.
So the issue, our biggest issue, has been how do we get a credible electoral system and process that produces the candidate, and when they read the results, people say, yes, that is the one who has won. That has been one of the major problems. The second problem, in cases where there is a disagreement, because a disagreement, election must produce disagreements, even in the United States or wherever there have been disagreements. Can there be a system that can adjudicate this matter and everybody gets contented? As we speak today, the electoral petition is still in court. Elections ended some 3 years ago, but we still have petitions which have not been sorted this up to today. In the last election of 2016, some petitions were resolved when people had even left parliament. So which type of adjudication is that? Number two, there are even some funny judgments. I've always given this example. In Nansana here, municipality, under Justice Kavuma, or before Justice Kavuma, there was a petition that Wakaima the current MP, that in fact is that he came back.
That was in 2016.
Had used the name Wakaima, which is not his name. And the man nullified the election and appoints a person to replace him. The court is the one which appointed this Chibirige. Chibirige's son is also called Chibirige. To go, and Chibirige had been number 3. It was not even number 2. Or what we expected was a by-election. But this time the court said, in this case, since Chibirige is the one who has come to court, therefore he becomes the MOP. And it was very surprising. Number 2 said, hey, what about me who was number 2? He said, but you did not come to court. And that's why people say that matter, the judgment was written in Hotel Africana. And they saw Kavuma there in the evening writing the judgment alone. So such things, how can we remove them? By empowering our judicial system, as they have been suggesting. The judicial system where the president is the one electing the judges of the High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court is still problematic. I have said this elsewhere, I've even put it in pen, that the president is so powerful. So much so that everything that happens in the country becomes to his advantage. He has appointed the chairman Electoral Commission. He has appointed all the judges, anticipating if there will be a problem, they will go there. He, like for example, you could do, if you looked at the judgment in the Mbale case in the Court of Appeal, which was chaired by his Justice Winyindolo. If you look at that, the judgment of one by one judge, there is one who surprised me. That he could not nullify the election because it is very expensive. That yes, there were a lot of problems, but because the electoral process is so expensive and Uganda is still a poor country, now you look at that type of judge. So that judge is a cadre judge, in my view. And how do you eliminate that? By getting a process where judges become judges on merit, not by appointment. These judges, some of them are really cadre judges. Then the other problem in election is management of the electoral process. The police and the army, their involvement in elections. If we could have a way that very clear regulations are put in place to make sure that the army and the police should only come to give protection, to maintain law and order. In Uganda, they participate. They are participants. They are stopping.
The army shouldn't really.
They are stopping this candidate. They are allowing the other one. For example, you saw in the last election, some candidates were being allowed to campaign. Others are not. And being allowed by the army, according to the law, the army is not, the police is not supposed to be stopping any candidate. I've already said this. Then the other thing is also, I think the candidates themselves are also a problem. The candidates are also a problem in this electoral process. As I told you now, all candidates go there to win an election because it's a do and die. That's how you come in with things of rigging, things of forging papers, things. So as he suggested, such candidates can be stopped by, if you are found, for example, with evidence that you participated in electoral malpractice, there should be a way to sanction you, either not to come back in an election or you should be taken to jail.
Doctor, can I give you an example?
Yes.
A certain candidate in Bushenyi voted twice.
Can you imagine?
He was caught.
Can you imagine? And
the judge declared that he had voted twice, which was a mistake. Then he came back again in the by-elections. Heavens.
And won.
So, even if he didn't win.
So thank you very much. So
you consider concluding remarks.
So as I end, I want to say that in this country we should be looking forward to come up with a good system, not the one which advantages or disadvantages the other team. But that is not possible when the president is still with the powers that he wields. I've always said that this constitution has a major problem where the president has a lot of power. About 47 articles in the constitution are speaking about the president giving something He's either appointing the IGP, he's appointing the chairman Electoral Commission, they even did an amendment now. He's the one who appoints now chief administrative officers are appointed through his office. They are no longer in local government or public service. He is appointing almost everybody. The only person he's not appointing who gets involved in his business in swearing in is the bishop. The only person there now is the bishop. When you look at it, the person guarding him, the army commander, he's the one who has appointed him. The chief justice who presides over court is the one who appointed him. When you check the IGP is the one who appointed him. The one of prison is the one who appointed him. So the only person in that tent of swearing in who is carrying out a function and was not appointed by the president is either the priest or the bishop who leads
Are
the
you
prayer.
sure the bishop is not appointed? Is his recommendation?
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your views with us. Yes, Mr. Ochieno, your closing remarks on the program.
No, I think we are not in a democracy. We've never been. As I was telling you guys, Museveni did not believe in progress politics to his credit. I was just reading some notes earlier, as I said, from the time of the military commission, he did not believe in it. Of course, he formed UPM as possibly a long-term political front, knowing very well they would not win elections at the time, but as a political wing of an establishment that would eventually become a long-term military outfit. You realize UPM as a political party of 1980 does not exist. So we really are not going to have fundamental changes in this country as far as democracy is concerned, in as long as, unfortunately, Mr. Museveni remains in power. We can make these suggestions, hope that certain changes do take place, but as long as Museveni is in charge, Museveni is not interested in pluralism, Museveni is not interested in democracy, he's never been a Democrat, and he's presented himself that he's basically using the system to serve his interests, his children, his grandchildren. It's a pity that many Ugandans bought up to his junk, a bit of his propaganda and part of his agenda, deeply helped mainstream him, but here we are. But going forward, I think Ugandans need to see Museveni for what he is, and then we begin to look at ways in which we're able to come together slightly more, investigate history, critique history, critique 1980, critique 1969, critique 1962, critique 1961, critique the NRA massacre of 2021, critique the atrocities in northern Uganda, come to national consensus, come to round table, and begin to make sure that we create an enabling environment in which we're able to have a national conversation that includes the Buganda question, the northern question, the eastern question, the military question, the Luwero question. But then at the end of the day, then hopefully we're able to begin to find consensus around which we're able to build a possibility for a democracy for which maybe your generation and the generation of your fantastic Camara people, maybe those ones who will enjoy this democracy. UPC tried, we tried a little bit, we're not perfect, but whatever the case, the environment is neither here nor there as far as we are today. So these reforms are basically fighting things, and I think as Ndebesa was saying, unless it's something which is going to favor Mr. Museveni, who does not believe in pluralism anyway, we're not going to get anywhere.
Many thanks indeed, Mr. Ochieno, for sharing your thoughts with us on the program. Professor, your closing remarks on the show.
My closing remarks is that this issue of elections is a very important issue in nation building, in state building, and in addressing inequality and the crisis of the state and harmony for the country. Unfortunately, since independence, or even before independence, the 1961 elections were unfair because there was a lot of intimidation, and there are people, especially in Uganda, only a third of eligible voters managed to register to vote because Mengo intimidated them. The two elections had those issues of electoral college and manipulation and intimidation. The 1980 elections had issues. Elections since 1986 have had those issues, either in law or in policing, or in financing, or in militarizing, or in adjudication. And we all know where things are wrong, except that some individuals want short-term advantage to win others using unfair means.
True.
In the hope or in the short-sightedness, understanding, myopic, that once you rig, you will be happy, you have positions in power, you will get money, you will be rich, others can go hang. But from the experience of 62, is that the violence, the instability, the disharmony, the polarization that arise out of elections results into the suffering of Ugandans. All those who rigged and those who lost, we all suffer. Can we come back to the drawing table? First of all, deconstruct those attitudes of celebrating because you have cheated. And I see people even in the church taking Holy Communion. No, they are not sinners. Rigging elections is a sin. Anybody who rigs elections is a sinner. If you think you are rigging elections and you are not a sinner because you don't fornicate, you are a sinner.
A political sin or a canonical sin?
A stupid sinner. Anybody who rigs elections is a sinner.
True.
Can we come? Because the results actually are more dangerous to society than somebody who steals a chicken. Because when you steal elections, you weaken the state, you result into the suffering of the people when they have conflicts, when they have violence. So we need to change our attitudes and then change our systems. By the way, I would suggest that we go for proportional representation. A mixed or proportional representation, and the winner take it all. Because proportional representation ensures fairness and equity in representation in parliament. Because when you use the current electoral system we have of winner take it all, or one past the post, you find that, let me give practical examples. I think BSJ or Kyagulanyi or NUP or FDC at one time had 37% of the national support.
NUP in the previous election, 38%.
38%. But in parliament, they don't even have, I think, 20%.
No.
So, under proportional representation, they would also have roughly 38%. But as we talk now, the NUP group is underrepresented. Or for that matter, the whole of opposition is underrepresented in the parliament because we are using the winner take it all. To me, this Westminster British winner take it all system does not augur well with national integration in Uganda. We need to use the continental Europe. Most of Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries, I think the Germans and all that, they use proportional representation to ensure that there is inclusivity. There is no exclusivity. Once you exclude and jubilate, you can jubilate for 1 year, for 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. There is a time when you will cry. Once you jubilate, that the other proverb of Nchima, a monkey does what a young monkey. It is popular. A young monkey, when it is looking at a forest burning
forest,
and there is that light at night, for it admires it and jubilates. Those who jubilate because elections have been rigged are like the proverbial young monkey. That jubilation will turn into crying one time or the other. Let's be statesmen. Look at the next generation. Whether it was Mengo, whether it was UPC, whether it is NRM, those who have political power and are in charge of organizing elections should sit back and reflect and be statesmen and women and say, let us have a fair system, fair values. When elections, when we are supposed to have won fairly, if I think Ugandans are defeated fairly, even if they dispute elections, by the way, inwardly, they will think, they will know that they were defeated, and gradually, they will even keep quiet. I can assure you, when people know that they have been defeated fairly, even if they claim that they have not been defeated fairly, they will not fight.
No.
But once they know that they were defeated unfairly, they may not fight today, tomorrow, but the other day they will fight. But it's not only fighting. We want the legitimacy of the state. But there is a legitimacy of the state, legitimacy of the system, and we build a nation. Fellow Ugandans, Uganda is not yet a functioning nation state. We have a hardware as a country given by the British, but the software is malfunctioning. We need to have both a functioning software and a hardware in order to move forward in development and other things. As long as you have Ugandans who are excluded by the unfair electoral system and you jubilate, you are the proverbial young monkey jubilating over the burning forest.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your views with us on the program. Once again, I must appreciate you, my guests, Dr. Mr. Ochieno and Professor, for your excellent submission on the topic for discussion today and for your patriotic guidance to the populace out there. Once again, much appreciation to our viewers for keeping us company from the start up to the conclusion of this program. Many thanks to the production unit for keeping us live on air. Please, our esteemed viewers, engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Instagram, we are on YouTube, where you can watch and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.